Welcome to Set Up Vendors or Account Types, followed underneath your Bookkeeping My Business. Okay, in this section, what we're going to do is you have to figure out, before we get started, you'll need to figure out how you want to organize your bookkeeping. If you want it to be, if you want to track it by vendor, and what I mean by that is, say for example, if you want to set up a vendor as AT&T, and you'd like to see how much money you spend every year or over all the years to AT&T for your telephone or for your internet, because then you would log your transactions underneath AT&T, the vendor, or if you have a pretty big office, that might be a little bit too time consuming to have to go into every single vendor. If you say have about 70 vendors, one, to set them all up would be a little bit of time, but also every time you get a receipt or something, you have to go into that vendor and log it. So I'm going to show you two different methods. One is the vendor method. The other method is, I call it the account method, where I'm just setting up a client called checking account, and I have a client called MasterCard account, and I have another client called miscellaneous, and underneath that I log all my transactions. So basically I've divided it up based on what method of payment I'm using. Either am I using a check, either electronic check, an EFT, or am I using my MasterCard to make the payment, or is it a miscellaneous payment, which typically would be out-of-pocket cash that I didn't write a check, or I did not use my MasterCard. So let's go back to the first step where we're going to do it by vendor. So I'm going to go into the search, and I'm going to create a vendor. So for the Social Security number, I typically use the vendor's phone number. So say AT&T's phone number is 800, and I'll type the name of the client, AT&T. I search. You shouldn't find anything. Then you're going to add a new client. And again, I'm going to switch it over from client type individual to business, and then save. And then I'll scroll down, and the return year is going to default to the current year. So depending on, this actually doesn't depend on if you're going to use it for, say we're going to do bookkeeping for 2012. So I'm going to take that year to 2012 for this vendor. And again, this information is really not a very important: return type, difficulty, referral type. So I'm just filling it in with anything. And the preparer, I'm just going to put 9 assigned. The main thing you need to do is change your business type to Bookkeeping My Office. Save. And over here in the status, the setup, now I'm going to switch this over to, actually I'll leave it at setup for now. I'm going to save it. Then right down here, now I have an account set up for AT&T, and next time whenever I'm going to log any kind of transactions, which we'll cover in the next section, this is where I'd be logging them under AT&T. So I'd be, when I get an AT&T bill in, I'm going to look for my vendor AT&T, and then I'd come down here and actually log the transactions, which we're going to cover next section. But so this is how you would do it if you're going to do it by vendor. Another method would be to, if I do a search, and I'm going to set it up as again, I said checking account, MasterCard, and miscellaneous. So I'm going to do a checking account. So what I do is, obviously I don't have a phone number for my checking account. I could use my bank phone number, I guess, but I go ahead and label it the year. So I'm going to set this up for 2012, and I put CK for checking. I hit enter. I'm not going to find anything. I'll hit add new client, and I'm going to switch this over to business, and I call this checking account because that's where I'm making my payments from. I save it. Now down here, how I categorize this for the year, the tax return year, I actually use this for the month and the year, okay, because I'm going to organize my checking accounts based on the month. So I'm going to have 12 months, obviously, and I'm going to have all my transactions that came out of my checking account for each month. So say this is January, I'm going to go ahead and then say 01/12, And again, these are not applicable at all. And I'll just put whomever I think I would not assigned. And the main thing is I'm going to put bookkeeping my office. I save it. And I can go ahead and I'll say this is accounts payable because I'm going to say I'm in the month of January. And again, as soon as I start logging in, and which I'm going to go over in the next section, when we log in transactions, any kind of expense or income coming from my checking account, I'm going to go ahead and log underneath the account, checking account for the month January. Now, if I want to create now February, all I'm going to do is I do a search, just like you add a client. So I'm going to do 2012 CK, and I see 112 right here for the year. I'm just going to hit add, and in this case it's going to default to 2011. I'm just going to put 212, save it, and it's all going to be organized right down here. So under my other returns, I'm going to have all 12 months, so I can quickly go to any month and I'll be able to look at transactions. And I have some data I can show you, so we don't have to key all this in. So I'll show you exactly how that looks. So if I were to go back, let me show you quickly. When I go to my home page and I go into one of my years for 2011, when I click on checking account, so it's kind of nice ordered all by month here. I can go into any of the months and I can look and see all my transactions. So I would set up MasterCard exactly the same way. I call it 2012 MC for MasterCard. I search, not going to find a client, add new client, switch it to business, and I'm going to type in MasterCard, and I save it. And I'm going to switch this to 1/12 because it's the month of January. And not assigned, switch the business type to bookkeeping my office, save it. And now I will move this actually to open months because accounts payable is what I'm using for the checking, is because I actually log my bills in, which I'll show you in the next section, and then I pay them every Friday. And this one, I'm just going to say it's open months, and as I get my bills that come in that are being automatically paid by my MasterCard, I log them in. And I would do the exact same thing for miscellaneous too. So I would set up another kind. In fact, I call it 2012 MISC, and then I call it miscellaneous, and set it up exactly the same way. So one thing I wanted to point out before I move to the next section, we covered opening balance previously. Typically what I do, which now it is right here in setup, I forgot to tell you that once I am done recording my opening balance, I get out of setup, and what I would do is I just make it complete. Because you shouldn't have to go back to that once you actually log in your opening balances. So that's all I had for setting up your accounts, your vendors, and your account. So you pretty much have to decide what kind of detail do you like. Now, it would be nice to have all your vendors so you could actually see how much money you pay each vendor, and there's a report that would show that. But in my case, it was just going to be too much of a hassle to have to go into every single vendor every time I got a bill. And make my payments because I do it every Friday. So I'd have to actually go into each one and do it. Now I can just go in under checking account. I may change that later. Maybe I'll find that that's more beneficial later. But as of now, I went through 2010 and I logged that in just using my checking account as a client and MasterCard as a client and miscellaneous as a client, and it worked out fine. So next section we'll talk about how to actually record some income and expense journal entries. Thank you.